Welcome back to Tina Romance Library, where powerful alphas fall hard, and the women they underestimate change everything. Every story here is complete, immersive, and emotion-driven. No cliffhangers, no rushed endings, just full romances you can sink into. So if you love possessive alphas, strong heroines who don't beg, slow burn tension, emotional payoffs, and stories that actually finish, you're in the right place. I need you to join the pack right now by subscribing. Leave a like if you enjoy immersive romance, and settle in because once the story begins, we don't stop until the ending. Now, let's get into it. They said I wouldn't survive the winter. My own father said it standing at the edge of our territory with his arms crossed and his eyes empty, like I was already a ghost. Like the daughter he raised for 18 years had already disappeared into the snow. The pack elders said it too, their voices cold and clinical, as they stripped my name from the family records. And Garrett, my fated mate, the one whose scent was supposed to call to my soul, he said it with a shrug and a half-smile, like my exile was nothing more than an inconvenience he'd already forgotten. An omega with no pack is a dead omega, he'd told me, turning his back before I could even catch my breath. You'll be gone before the first snowfall. That was 11 months ago. 11 months of proving them wrong in the quietest, loneliest way possible. 11 months in this cabin that barely deserves the name 4 walls of rotting timber and a roof that leaks when the wind howls hard enough. It sits 3 miles past the northern boundary, deep in the frozen wilderness where no wolf with any sense would venture. The kind of place you go to disappear. The kind of place you go to die. Except I didn't die. I learned to trap rabbits with wire. I scavenged from an abandoned fence. I learned which roots wouldn't poison me and how to stretch a single candle through 5 nights of darkness. I learned to choke down the kind of loneliness that settles in your chest like ice, heavy and sharp and unforgiving. I learned to stop flinching at every sound in the woods, stop hoping it might be someone coming to bring me home, because nobody was coming. My wolf, already weak from being an omega, already small and breakable, she went silent after the rejection. I can still feel her sometimes, a flicker of warmth buried so deep I wonder if I'm imagining it. But she doesn't speak, doesn't fight. She curled up somewhere inside me the day Garrett looked at me with disgust and said the words that shattered the bond before it ever had a chance to form. I, Garrett Thorne, reject you, Isla Crane, as my mate. Just like that. Simple, clean, devastating. The pack said I was too weak to be a true wolf, too soft, too breakable. My father said I brought him nothing but shame. Garrett said I wasn't worth the trouble. So they cast me out like I was something rotten, something that would contaminate them if I stayed. They wanted me to disappear quietly into the wilderness, to become just another cautionary tale whispered around the fire. Don't end up like the Crane girl. Don't let yourself become useless. But I didn't disappear. I survived. Not because I'm strong, I'm not. Not by any measure that matters to wolves like them. I survived because I learned to live small, to need nothing, to expect even less. I survived because when you hit the bottom, when there's nothing left to take from you, you find out what you're actually made of. And it turns out I'm made of something stubborn and quiet and impossible to kill. Out here, the silence is absolute. The snow muffles everything, sound, hope, memory. The trees stand like sentinels, dark and indifferent. The cold seeps into everything, even your thoughts, until you're not sure what's real anymore and what's just the hypothermia talking. I stopped looking for kindness, stopped waiting for rescue, stopped believing in fate or bonds or any of the beautiful lies they tell you when you're young. And then, 3 nights ago, something changed. I heard scratching at my door, desperate, weak, barely audible over the wind. When I opened it, I found a pup collapsed in the snow, thin as a whisper, covered in cuts and frost, his silver fur matted with ice and blood, his eyes pale gold and wild with fear locked onto mine. And for a second, I felt something I hadn't felt in almost a year. My wolf stirred. Just a flutter, just a breath of recognition, but it was there. Real, undeniable. I pulled him inside. I didn't think, didn't question it. I just knew with a certainty that terrified me that this starving, broken pup shivering on my floor was somehow connected to me in ways I couldn't begin to understand. I didn't know who he was, didn't know where he came from or why he'd stumbled into my corner of nowhere. I didn't know that saving him would unravel everything. I didn't know the pup at my door would become my fate. The rejection ceremony happened at dawn. They made me stand in the center of the pack circle, while the sky bled pink and gold over the mountains, like the world was too beautiful for what was about to happen. My legs shook, but I locked my knees, forced myself to stay upright. I wouldn't fall. I wouldn't give them that. Garrett stood across from me in his ceremonial leathers, looking everywhere but at my face, at the trees, at his father, at the dirt beneath his boots, anywhere but into the eyes of the girl who'd known since she was 14 that he was hers. The bond had snapped into place the moment I turned 18, sharp and sweet and inevitable, except it was only inevitable for me. For him, it was a burden he'd never wanted. I, Garrett Thorne, future alpha of the Crescent Valley Pack, reject you, Isla Crane, as my mate and bond. His voice didn't even shake. Steady, practiced, like he'd rehearsed it in the mirror until the words lost all meaning. But they hadn't lost meaning for me. Each syllable hit like a physical blow, tearing at something fundamental inside my chest. The bond fragile and new, and mine shredded like paper, leaving nothing but a hollow ache that made it hard to breathe. My wolf whimpered once, a broken sound I felt more than heard, and then she retreated so far inside me I wasn't sure she'd ever come back. I didn't cry. I wouldn't let myself. Not there. Not in front of 200 wolves who were already looking at me like I was something pitiable and small. My father stood with the elders, his face carved from stone, no hint of the man who used to carry me on his shoulders when I was small, when my mother was still alive and our family still meant something. Isla Crane, Elder Moira's voice cut through the morning air, sharp and final. You are hereby removed from the Crescent Valley Pack Registry. You have no name here, no family, no protection. You will leave before nightfall, and you will not return. My father didn't flinch, didn't object. He just stood there with his arms crossed and his jaw set, and I realized with a clarity that hurt worse than the rejection that he'd been waiting for this. That maybe some part of him had always been ashamed of what I was, an Omega daughter in a family of strong betas, a weak link he could finally cut loose. Do you have anything to say? Moira asked, her tone suggesting she hoped I didn't. I looked at Garrett one last time, really looked at him, at the boy I'd loved since we were children running through these same woods, back when I still believed in fate and forever, and all the pretty stories they tell Omega girls about finding their mates. His jaw was tight, his hands fisted at his sides, but his eyes, those green eyes I'd memorized in 1,000 different lights, remained fixed on the ground. He couldn't even look at me while he destroyed me. No, I said quietly. I have nothing to say. I turned and walked toward the northern boundary, my head high, my spine straight, every step measured and deliberate, even though my legs felt like they might give out. Even though my wolf was screaming in the empty cavern where our bond used to be. Even though I wanted to collapse right there and beg them to reconsider, to give me another chance, to let me prove I could be worth keeping. But I didn't beg. I didn't cry. I didn't give them the satisfaction of watching me break. I walked into exile like I'd chosen it myself, and I didn't look back once, learning to survive alone. The first week almost killed me. I knew nothing about survival. I was an Omega raised in comfort, trained for pack duties and child-rearing and maintaining harmony. Nobody teaches Omega girls how to set snares or start fires in the rain or gut a rabbit without vomiting. Those were skills for hunters and warriors, and I was neither. But I learned fast, because the alternative was dying, and I'd be damned if I'd prove them right. I learned to read animal tracks in the mud. Learned which plants would fill my belly without poisoning me, even if they tasted like dirt and regret. I learned to chop wood with an axe I found half buried in the snow behind the cabin, probably left by whoever lived here before me, before they either died or got smart and left. Every blister that formed and popped and formed again was a small victory. Proof I was still here, still fighting. The cabin became mine through sheer stubborn occupation. I patched the roof with branches and moss, stuffed rags into the gaps between the timber to keep out the worst of the wind. I made a bed from pine boughs and a ratty blanket I'd carried in my exile pack, the only thing my father had allowed me to take besides the clothes on my back. Loneliness, I discovered, has a weight to it. It sits on your chest at night when the fire burns low and the darkness presses against the windows like something alive. It whispers that you're forgotten, that everyone you loved has moved on without you, that you could disappear tomorrow and nobody would notice until your bones turned up in the spring thaw. I talked to myself just to hear a voice, narrated my days like I was telling a story to someone who cared. Well, Isla, looks like you caught 2 rabbits today. Moving up in the world. Or, that's the 3rd time this week you've sewn up your own hand. Maybe learn to use a knife properly. Loneliness makes a terrible conversationalist, but it was all I had. The nights were the hardest. That's when the memories came, unwanted and sharp. Garrett's laugh. The way my father used to check on me before bed when I was small. Pack runs under the full moon. Dozens of wolves moving as one through the forest, belonging to something bigger than yourself. I'd press my hands against my chest and try to feel my wolf, try to coax her back, but she stayed hidden, silent. Maybe she blamed me for losing everything. Maybe she was just too broken to face the world anymore. I started to wonder if I was losing pieces of myself out here. If you could forget how to be a wolf if you went long enough without shifting, without pack, without purpose. But every morning I woke up, fed the fire, set my traps, kept moving, because spite, it turns out, is an excellent motivator. It was snowing the night he came to me. Not the gentle, picturesque kind of snow you see in paintings. This was the vicious, horizontal kind that stung exposed skin and turned the world into a white void. I'd been reinforcing the doorframe, the wood had started to rot, and I was terrified it would give way during a storm when I heard it. Scratching. Weak. Desperate. Barely audible over the wind. My first instinct was to ignore it. Nothing good happened in storms like this. Nothing human, anyway. But the scratching continued, irregular and fading, and something in my chest pulled tight. My wolf, silent for so long, suddenly pressed against my consciousness, urgent in a way I hadn't felt since before the rejection. Help him. I froze. Those were the first words she'd spoken to me in almost a year, and they weren't a suggestion. They were a command. I grabbed my knife because I wasn't stupid, isolated or not, and pulled open the door. A pup collapsed across the threshold, black fur matted with ice and something darker. Blood, I realized. Fresh blood and older stains. He was small, maybe 3 months old, all sharp angles and visible ribs beneath his coat. His breathing came in shallow, rattling gasps. His eyes, pale gold, almost silver in the firelight, found mine, and in them I saw pain and terror and something else, something that felt like recognition. "Oh," I breathed, dropping to my knees. "Oh, you poor thing." I didn't think, didn't question where he'd come from or why he'd stumbled to my door specifically. I just gathered him into my arms. He was so light, too light, like he was made of hollow bones and air, and kicked the door shut behind us. The moment I touched him, something inside me settled. It was subtle, like a puzzle piece clicking into place in a picture I didn't know I was building. My wolf rose to the surface, more alert than she'd been in months, her attention fixed entirely on the dying pup in my arms. Not protective, exactly. Something deeper, more fundamental. "Ours," she whispered. "Keep him safe." I didn't understand, couldn't understand, but I didn't argue. I laid him near the fire and started checking for injuries. Cuts covered his legs and flanks, some deep, some shallow, all infected. His paw pads were torn and bleeding. But worse than the physical wounds was the smell. Beneath the blood and mud and fear, there was something chemical, something wrong. "Poison. Who did this to you?" I murmured, reaching for the medical supplies I'd scavenged and stolen and hoarded. My hand shook as I threaded a needle. "Who hurts a pup?" He whimpered, trying to lift his head, and I placed a gentle hand on his neck. Shh. Stay still. I've got you. I promise. I've got you. I worked through the night, cleaned wounds, stitched the worst of them, forced water down his throat, and then a mixture of herbs I hoped would counteract whatever poison was in his system. He drifted in and out of consciousness, his breathing labored, his heartbeat thready and weak. I should have been terrified, should have been questioning why my wolf was so fixated on this random pup, should have been protecting myself, keeping my distance, because attachment only led to pain. But I couldn't let go. I held him against my chest as the fire burned low, feeling his small heart flutter against my palm. I whispered to him in the darkness promises I had no right to make, comfort I barely believed in myself. "You're going to be okay," I told him, my voice breaking. "You're safe now. I won't let anything happen to you." His eyes opened once more before dawn, those strange pale gold eyes, and they fixed on my face with an intensity that didn't belong in something so young. For just a moment, I could have sworn I felt something. A pull. A thread connecting us that hadn't existed before. Then he closed his eyes and went still, his breathing so shallow I had to press my ear to his chest to make sure he was still alive. I didn't sleep. I just held him and waited for morning. Waited to see if fate had brought him to me to save, or to teach me that even here, in my exile, I couldn't protect the things I cared about. He survived the first night, then the second, then the third. Each morning I woke expecting to find him cold and still, but each morning he was there breathing, fighting, clinging to life with a stubbornness that reminded me of myself. The poison worked its way through his system slowly, painfully. Some nights he shook so hard I thought his small body might break apart. Other nights he burned with fever, whimpering in his sleep, while I pressed cool cloths to his fur and whispered reassurances I wasn't sure he could hear. But he held on, and slowly, impossibly slowly, he started to heal. By the end of the first week, he could lift his head. By the second, he was taking water on his own. I mashed roots and rabbit meat into a paste he could swallow, feeding him small amounts every few hours like a mother would. He ate with a desperate hunger that broke my heart, like he'd been starving for longer than just the days before he found me. "You're going to eat me out of house and home," I told him on the 10th day, watching him demolish his third portion of food. "I'm going to have to set twice as many traps just to keep up with you." He paused mid-bite, those pale gold eyes flicking up to my face, and I could have sworn I saw understanding there, amusement even, like he knew exactly what I was saying and found my complaint hilarious. "Don't look at me like that," I said, fighting a smile. "I'm serious. You eat more than I do and you're a fraction of my size. Where does it even go?" He made a sound that wasn't quite a bark, more like a huff, and went back to eating. I found myself talking to him constantly. At first it was just narration describing what I was doing as I did it, filling the silence that had become oppressive during my months alone. But it evolved into actual conversation. I told him about my day, complained about the weather, even confessed things I'd never said out loud. "I miss running," I admitted one night, sitting beside him by the fire. He'd graduated from lying limp to curling into a proper sleeping position, his head resting on his paws. "I haven't shifted since the rejection. I'm afraid if I try, she won't come. My wolf. I can feel her sometimes, but she's so distant, like she's hiding from me. Or maybe hiding from what we lost." He lifted his head and looked at me with those two intelligent eyes, and something in his gaze felt like comfort, like understanding. "You probably think I'm pathetic," I continued, reaching out to scratch behind his ear. He leaned into the touch, a low rumble starting in his chest that might have been a purr if wolves did such things. "Exiled Omega talking to a pup about her feelings. But you're a good listener, you don't judge. And you're the only company I've got, so you're stuck hearing all my problems." His tail thumped once against the floor. I laughed, actually laughed, and realized it was the first time I'd made that sound since before the rejection. The first time joy had felt possible. "You're a strange one," I told him softly. "But I'm glad you found me." He watched me with an intensity that should have been unsettling in something so young, but instead felt right, like he was memorizing my face, like I mattered to him as much as he was starting to matter to me. For the first time in almost a year, I didn't feel alone. As he grew stronger, I started noticing things that didn't quite add up. The first incident happened 2 weeks after he'd arrived. I was checking my traps near the eastern boundary when I heard voices. Male, rough. Not from my old pack, the accent was wrong, harsher. Rogues, maybe, or scouts from another territory. I froze, my heart hammering. I was well beyond Crescent Valley's borders, but that didn't mean I was safe. Lone wolves, especially Omegas, were vulnerable. Easy targets for wolves with bad intentions. The pup had followed me that morning despite my protests. He was stronger now, able to walk without stumbling, though he still tired easily. I'd turned to shoo him back toward the cabin when I heard it. A growl, low, threatening, coming from the pup at my feet. He'd planted himself between me and the direction of the voices, his small body rigid, his lips pulled back to reveal baby teeth that shouldn't have been intimidating, but somehow were. The growl coming from his chest was too deep, too mature for something his size. It raised the hair on the back of my neck. "Hey," I whispered, crouching beside him. "It's okay. We'll just go back." His growl intensified. Not at me, he never growled at me, but at the threat he'd perceived before I'd even registered it. The voices faded, moving away from us, and slowly the pup relaxed. He turned those pale gold eyes on me, and I saw something fierce in them, protective. "What are you?" I breathed. He just tilted his head, looking for all the world like an innocent pup, and trotted back toward the cabin like nothing had happened. But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to him than I understood. The strange moments multiplied after that. He slept beside my bed every night, positioned between me and the door. If I got up in the middle of the night, he followed, his eyes tracking my every movement like a guardian rather than a dependent. When I worked outside, he stayed close, his attention constantly scanning our surroundings. And when I touched him, just casual contact, a hand on his head or scratching behind his ears, something in my chest eased. The constant ache from the broken mate bond dulled. My wolf stirred, more present than she'd been in months, drawn to him in a way that made no sense. "You're supposed to be a pup," I told him one evening, running my fingers through his fur. He'd curled up beside me while I mended a tear in my coat, his warmth seeping into my side. "Pups don't act like this. They're playful and reckless, and they don't have the sense God gave a rabbit. But you," he raised his head, looking at me with those eyes that seemed far too old, far too aware. "You're different," I finished softly. My heart was doing something dangerous, something I'd sworn I wouldn't let it do again. It was getting attached, invested, starting to need him in a way that went beyond simple companionship. When he was near, the loneliness receded. When he looked at me, I felt seen, truly seen in a way I hadn't, since before the rejection. When I touched him, my broken pieces didn't hurt quite so much. It was too much, too intense, too complicated for what should have been a simple case of nursing an injured animal back to health. But I couldn't stop it. And the most terrifying part? I didn't want to. It happened a month after he'd arrived, on a night when the northern lights painted the sky in shades of green and violet. We were sitting outside the cabin, something I'd started doing once he was strong enough, just to feel less trapped by the four walls that had been my entire world. He was sitting beside me, his fur brushing against my arm, watching the lights dance across the darkness. "I should give you a name," I said quietly. "I can't keep calling you the pup forever, especially since you're not really a pup anymore, are you?" He'd grown in the weeks since I'd found him. Not dramatically, but enough that I could see he was going to be large once fully grown. His paws were too big for his body, his legs awkward with the promise of height and strength to come. "You appeared out of the darkness," I continued, thinking out loud. "Showed up in the middle of a storm when I'd given up on company. And you're black as midnight. Shadow. That fits, doesn't it?" He turned his head to look at me, and I could have sworn I saw approval in his gaze. "Shadow," I repeated, testing it. It felt right, solid, like something true. Is that okay with you? His tail wagged just once, but deliberately. I laughed, warm despite the cold air. Shadow it is, then. I reached over and pulled him closer, wrapping my arm around his shoulders in something dangerously close to a hug. He allowed it, pressing against my side, his warmth chasing away the chill that had nothing to do with temperature. You know what? I whispered into his fur. You're family now. I don't care where you came from or why you ended up here. You're mine, and I'm yours, and that's all that matters. The words felt heavier than they should have. Like a vow, like a claiming. My wolf rose to the surface, more present than she'd been since the rejection, and she pressed against my consciousness with a feeling I couldn't quite name. Something like satisfaction, like recognition, like she'd been waiting for me to understand something important and I'd finally taken the first step. Shadow made a sound soft, almost like a whine, and pressed closer. His nose nudged my hand, and when I looked down, his eyes were fixed on my face with an intensity that stole my breath. For a moment, just a heartbeat, I felt it. A pull, a connection. Something singing in my blood that whispered mine in a voice that sounded like forever. Then it was gone, leaving me shaken and confused and certain I'd imagined it. Come on, I said, standing up before I could overthink what had just happened. Let's get inside before we freeze. He followed me into the cabin, staying close to my side like always, and as I banked the fire for the night, I tried to ignore the way my heart raced every time he looked at me, tried to ignore the growing certainty that Shadow wasn't just a pup I'd saved. He was something more, something important, something mine in a way I didn't have words for yet. I lay down in my makeshift bed, and he curled up beside it like he did every night, his breathing evening out as he drifted toward sleep. Good night, Shadow, I whispered into the darkness. His tail thumped once against the floor, and for the first time since my exile began, I fell asleep with a smile on my face and hope dangerous. Fragile hope beginning to bloom in the ruins of my heart. They came at twilight, when the sky bleeds into darkness and the world holds its breath between day and night. I was inside the cabin, stirring a pot of rabbit stew, when Shadow's head snapped up. His ears flattened against his skull and a growl rumbled through his chest, deeper than I'd ever heard from him, resonating with a warning that made my wolf wake instantly, flooding my system with adrenaline. What is it? I whispered, setting down the spoon. He was already moving toward the door, his hackles raised, his body coiled like a spring ready to explode into violence. I'd seen him protective before, but this was different. This was primal, dangerous. Then I heard them. Footsteps, heavy, multiple sets, circling the cabin with predatory precision. My heart slammed against my ribs. I grabbed my knife, the only weapon I had, and moved to the window. Through the gaps in the wood, I could see them. 4 massive wolves, black as midnight, moving through the trees like shadows given form. They weren't rogues. Their movements were too coordinated, too purposeful. These were trained warriors, and they'd surrounded my cabin so quickly and quietly I hadn't heard them until they wanted me to. One of them, the largest, with a scar running down his shoulder, stepped into the clearing and shifted. The transformation was seamless, powerful, the kind of shift that came from a wolf so dominant they didn't need to think about it. He stood naked in the snow, unbothered by the cold, his muscles carved from stone and violence, his eyes dark and hard fixed on my door. "We know you have him," he called out, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "The pup. Send him out and we'll leave you in peace." My blood turned to ice. Shadow pressed against my leg, still growling, his small body vibrating with barely contained aggression. I looked down at him and saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Not fear, resolution, like he'd known this moment was coming and had been preparing for it. "Isla Crane," the man continued, and my stomach dropped at the sound of my name in his mouth. "We mean you no harm, but the pup belongs to us. He's Pack. He needs to come home." Pack. The word struck something sharp and painful in my chest. Of course he had a pack. Of course wolves were looking for him. I'd been stupid to think I could keep him, that he was mine just because I'd saved him. But the thought of giving him up, of watching them take him away, made my wolf snarl with a possessiveness that shocked me. "How do I know you won't hurt him?" I called back, hating how my voice shook. "He was poisoned, half dead. Someone did that to him. We're here to protect him," the man said. "Not harm him, but we need him back. Now." Shadow's growl intensified. He moved in front of me, placing himself between me and the door, and something about that small, fierce gesture broke through my paralysis. This wolf, this pup I'd saved and fed and named, was willing to stand between me and 4 full-grown warriors, was willing to fight for me, even though he was still recovering, still weak, still so damn young. I couldn't let them take him. The realization hit me with crystalline clarity. I couldn't do it. I didn't care if they were his pack, didn't care if they had every right to him. He'd chosen me. He'd come to my door, survived because of my care, trusted me with his vulnerability. He was mine. I moved to the door and threw it open, stepping out into the cold with my knife gripped in my trembling hand. All 4 wolves turned to face me, 3 still in wolf form. 1 human, and the weight of their combined attention nearly drove me to my knees. They were powerful, ancient, the kind of wolves who could snap me in half without breaking a sweat. But I lifted my chin and stepped in front of Shadow anyway. "No," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "You're not taking him." The man's eyebrows rose. "Excuse me?" "You heard me." I shifted my stance, widening it, making myself a barrier. "I don't know who you are or what pack you belong to, but he stays with me. He's safe here. He's healing here, and I won't let you take him." One of the wolves, a female with silver-tipped ears, made a sound that might have been a laugh. The others shifted their weight, energy crackling through them like they were preparing to move. "Miss Crane," the man said, his voice dropping into something darker. "You don't understand what you're protecting. That pup is—" "Mine," I interrupted, the word ripping out of me with a ferocity I didn't know I possessed. "He's mine, and you'll have to go through me first." The clearing went silent. The man stared at me like I'd grown a second head. The wolves exchanged glances that I couldn't read. And Shadow went completely still behind me, his growling cutting off abruptly. "Well," the man said slowly, something like respect flickering across his face. "That's unexpected." "I don't care what you expected," I said, my hand tightening on my knife. "He's not leaving with you." The man opened his mouth to respond, but before he could speak, Shadow moved. He pushed past me, walking into the center of the clearing with his head high and his tail straight. The 4 wolves immediately dropped into submissive postures, heads down, ears back, bodies low to the ground. And then Shadow began to shift. I'd never seen a shift like this. It wasn't the quick, practical transformation of a wolf changing for convenience. This was power incarnate. The air itself seemed to vibrate as Shadow's form blurred and expanded, bones restructuring with audible cracks that made my stomach turn. Light, actual light, rippled across his fur like lightning through storm clouds. The shift took seconds but felt like eternity. When it finished, a man stood where the pup had been. He was tall, easily 6.5 feet, with broad shoulders and a frame built for violence. Scars decorated his chest and arms, silver lines that spoke of battles survived, of pain endured. His hair was black, falling just past his shoulders in waves that caught the moonlight. His face was all sharp angles and brutal beauty, the kind of face that would make people step aside without conscious thought. But it was his eyes that destroyed me. Those same pale gold eyes I'd been looking into for weeks, now set in a human face that radiated dominance like heat from a fire. They found mine across the clearing, and the world tilted on its axis. Because I knew those eyes, knew them in my soul. Mate, the word screamed through my consciousness, my wolf rising with a force that stole my breath. The bond I'd felt stirring, the connection I'd tried to deny it, snapped into place with devastating certainty, wrapping around my heart and squeezing until I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but stare at the man who'd been a pup in my arms just moments ago. The 4 wolves knelt. Not submissive postures this time. They went to one knee with their heads bowed in a gesture of absolute fealty. "Alpha Prime," the scarred man said, his voice reverent. "We've been searching for weeks. We feared." "I know what you feared," the man Shadow, but not Shadow, not anymore said, and his voice was gravel and smoke, authority wrapped in silk. "But I'm alive, and I'm here." His gaze never left mine. "Alpha Prime." The words echoed in my head, trying to find purchase. Alpha Prime meant ruler, leader, not just of a pack, but of multiple packs. It was a title reserved for wolves so powerful, so dominant, that other alphas bent the knee. And he'd been in my cabin, eating from my hand, sleeping beside my bed. "Kaylin," the female wolf said, having shifted to human form without me noticing. She was beautiful in that dangerous way warriors often were, all lean muscle and confident grace. "We need to get you home. You need proper medical care, protection, the council can wait," Kaylin said, still not looking away from me. "All of you. Leave us." The scarred man's eyes widened. "Alpha, we can't just—" "That wasn't a request, Marcus." The command in his voice made everyone in the clearing flinch, including me. "Take your wolves and patrol the perimeter. No one approaches this cabin. Do you understand?" "Yes, Alpha Prime," Marcus said immediately. The 4 wolves melted back into the forest, disappearing so completely it was like they'd never been there at all, leaving me alone with a man I didn't know but my soul recognized, standing in the snow while my world rearranged itself into something I couldn't comprehend. For a long moment, neither of us moved. He stood there, naked and scarred and impossibly powerful, watching me with an intensity that should have been threatening, should have made me run, but instead, it made me want to move closer, to touch him, to confirm he was real. I started, but my voice broke. I tried again. "You're Kaylin Thorne." Not a question. A statement of a fact that was rearranging my entire understanding of the past month. "I am," he confirmed, his voice softening in a way that made my chest ache. "And you're Isla Crane, the Omega who saved my life." "I didn't know," I whispered. "I didn't know who you were." "I know." He took a step toward me, and I saw him wince, saw the lingering evidence of his injuries in the way he moved. "That's why I didn't tell you." Another step. Closer now. Close enough that I could see the silver scars on his chest were claw marks. Close enough to smell him pine and snow, and something wild that made my wolf whimper with recognition. "You were dying," I said, needing to understand. Why were you—" "Poisoned," he said simply. "By wolves who thought removing me would create a power vacuum they could exploit. They were right about the poison, wrong about everything else." "You almost died," I said, remembering those first awful nights, the fever and convulsions, how certain I'd been that morning would bring his corpse. "I would have." His gaze intensified, burning through me. "If you hadn't found me, if you hadn't brought me inside, if you hadn't fought for me every single night when my body tried to give up." "I'm not—" I shook my head, taking a step back. "I'm just an Omega. I'm nothing. Exiled. Rejected. You're everything," he interrupted, and the raw honesty in his voice stopped my heart. "Do you understand what you did? An Alpha Prime, the most powerful wolf in 3 territories, showed up at your door dying and helpless, and you didn't hesitate, didn't ask who I was or what I could offer you. You just helped." He took another step, close enough now that I could feel the heat radiating from his skin despite the cold. "You fed me when I was nothing," he continued, his voice dropping to something intimate, something meant only for my ears. "Talked to me like I mattered, held me when I shook with poison and fever. You gave me a name, called me family, protected me from my own wolves because you thought they might hurt me." His hand lifted, hovering near my face, asking permission. "You stood in front of me," he said, wonder creeping into his tone. "An exiled Omega with a knife, facing 4 of my strongest warriors, willing to fight them all because you thought I needed protecting. You're my—" I started, then stopped, terrified to say the word, terrified to make it real. "Mate," he finished for me, his hand finally making contact, cupping my face with a gentleness that contradicted everything about his appearance. "You're my mate, Isla. I knew it the moment you touched me. My wolf knew, but I needed to be sure you felt it too. That it wasn't just gratitude or obligation." Tears burned in my eyes. "I thought you were a pup." "I know." A small smile tugged at his mouth, transforming his brutal features into something beautiful. "And you loved me anyway. That's what matters." The word love hung between us, too big and too true. "I don't understand," I whispered. "You're an Alpha Prime. You could have anyone. Why would fate give you a broken Omega who—" "You're not broken," he said fiercely, his other hand coming up to frame my face, holding me like I was precious. "You're the strongest wolf I've ever met. You survived rejection, exile, loneliness that would have killed weaker wolves. You built a life from nothing, and when I showed up dying on your doorstep, you saved me without expecting anything in return." His forehead dropped to rest against mine, and I felt the shudder that ran through him. "You fed me when I was nothing," he repeated, his voice rough with emotion. "And now I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never feel like nothing again." My hands came up to grip his wrists, needing to hold on to something real while my world spun. "Kalen," I breathed, testing his name on my tongue. His eyes closed, like hearing me say it caused him physical pleasure. "Say it again." "Kalin." Again. "Kalen." Stronger this time. Certain. When he opened his eyes, they were blazing with something that made my knees weak. Not just desire, though, that was there, hot and undeniable. This was deeper, possessive, eternal. "Mine," he said, the word a vow and a claim and a promise. "You're mine, Isla, and I'm yours. Always." The bond between us flared to life, no longer a gentle pull but a raging inferno. I felt him in my chest, in my bones, in every cell of my body. Felt his wolf twining with mine, two halves becoming whole. And for the first time since Garrett's rejection shattered me, I felt complete. The reality of what was happening hit me when Kalen finally stepped back, his hands sliding reluctantly from my face. "We need to leave," he said, his voice still soft but edged with something harder. "Command. Tonight." The words landed like stones in my stomach. "Leave?" "The wolves who poisoned me, they know I survived. They know I'm here." His jaw tightened, and I saw the alpha in him now, calculating threats and responses. "This cabin isn't safe anymore. You're not safe here." I looked past him at the small structure that had been my entire world for almost a year. 4 walls and a leaking roof. A fire that never burned quite warm enough. A bed made of pine boughs and desperation. It wasn't much. It had never been much. But it was mine. "I built a life here," I said quietly. "After they took everything from me, I built something from nothing. And now you're asking me to leave it behind." "I know." He moved closer again, unable to stay away, and I realized with a start that the bond was pulling at him too, demanding proximity, contact, connection. "I know what I'm asking, and I'm sorry, but the wolves who tried to kill me won't hesitate to use you against me now that they know what you are to me." "What you are to me," the words sent heat flooding through my veins. "They'll come here," he continued, his eyes searching mine, "and they won't be kind. They'll see you as leverage, a weakness they can exploit." "I'm not weak," I said automatically, the old defensive instinct flaring. "I know you're not." His hand lifted to my face again, thumb brushing my cheekbone with devastating gentleness. "But you're also not invincible. And I can't risk losing you when I just found you." The raw honesty in his voice stripped away my resistance. He wasn't commanding me, wasn't using his dominance to force my compliance. He was asking, offering protection while respecting my autonomy. It was more than Garrett had ever given me. More than my father. More than my pack. "Where would we go?" I asked. Relief flickered across his face. "My territory. Shadow Ridge. It's 2 days north. Fortified. Protected. You'll be safe there." "Your pack," I started, old fears rising. They won't want an exiled Omega. They'll respect my mate, he interrupted, steel entering his voice. Or they'll answer to me. And trust me, Isla, no one wants to answer to me. The certainty in his words should have been arrogant. Instead, it felt like shelter, like safety. I looked at the cabin one more time, then back at Kalen, at this man who'd been a broken pup in my arms, who'd let me save him when he could have revealed himself at any time, who was looking at me like I was something precious instead of discarded. Okay, I whispered. I'll go with you. The smile that broke across his face was blinding. Pack what you need, he said. We leave in an hour. I didn't have much. The clothes I'd salvaged. My mother's necklace, the only thing my father let me keep. A few tools and supplies. It all fit into one small pack that felt pathetically light for an entire year of survival. Kalen waited outside. Now dressed in clothes Marcus had brought, black pants and a shirt that did nothing to hide the predatory grace in every movement. His wolves were shadows in the tree line, guarding the perimeter, but I could feel their attention on us. On me, the exiled Omega who'd saved their Alpha Prime. When I emerged from the cabin with my pack, Kalen's eyes tracked over me with an intensity that made my breath catch. Then he held out his hand. Ready? He asked. I looked at his offered hand, scarred and strong and steady, and placed mine in it. Ready, I confirmed. And just like that, I walked away from my exile and into something unknown. The ride to his territory. They'd brought horses. I stared at the massive black stallion Colin gestured toward, my stomach sinking. I've never ridden a horse. You'll ride with me, he said simply, swinging up into the saddle with fluid grace before extending his hand down to me. I hesitated for only a moment before taking it. His grip was iron strong as he pulled me up in front of him, settling me between his thighs with my back against his chest. His arms came around me to grip the reins, effectively caging me in. Comfortable? He murmured against my ear, his breath warm on my neck. Comfortable was not the word I'd use. Overwhelmed, hyper-aware, burning with a heat that had nothing to do with his body temperature and everything to do with the mate bond singing between us. Fine, I managed, my voice strangled. I felt more than heard his quiet laugh. We rode through the night, 6 wolves moving through the forest like ghosts. Marcus led the way, the female warrior Sarah, I'd learned, brought up the rear, and 2 others flanked us on either side. They moved with military precision, constantly scanning for threats, communicating with hand signals I didn't understand. And through it all, Kalen's presence behind me was overwhelming. Every breath pressed his chest against my back. Every adjustment to the reins brought his arms tighter around me. I could feel his heartbeat steady and strong, matching rhythm with mine, until I couldn't tell where I ended and he began. You're tense, he observed after an hour of riding. I'm on a horse, I pointed out, with an Alpha Prime, being escorted by warriors who could snap me like a twig. Tense feels appropriate. They won't hurt you, he said, certainty absolute in his voice. They're staring. Because they were. I could feel their eyes on me, curious, assessing, probably wondering what their powerful Alpha saw in a broken Omega from a lesser pack. Kalen's arms tightened fractionally around me, and a low growl rumbled through his chest. Not loud enough for the others to hear clearly, but unmistakable in its meaning. Mine. Back off. The attention immediately shifted away. Was that really necessary? I asked, fighting a smile despite my nerves. Yes, he said flatly. They need to understand that you're not to be questioned or judged or even looked at with anything less than respect. You're being dramatic. I'm being clear. But there was something lighter in his tone now, almost playful. They're my wolves. They'll learn. And if I don't want to be coddled and protected like some fragile thing, then you'll tell me, he said, surprising me. And I'll listen. But right now, with assassins potentially tracking us and my wolf barely contained because you're in my arms and not yet marked, you're going to have to tolerate some protectiveness. Not yet marked. The words sent a shiver through me that had nothing to do with cold. You're shaking, he said immediately, concern flooding his voice. His hand released the reins to rest on my stomach, spreading warmth through the layers of clothing. Are you cold? No, I admitted, just Processing. Talk to me, he urged. Tell me what you're thinking. I was quiet for a moment, gathering my thoughts. A month ago I was alone, exiled, certain I'd die forgotten in those woods. And now I'm riding toward an Alpha Prime's territory as his mate. It's a lot to process. Regrets? The question was casual, but I heard the tension beneath it. The fear. No, I said honestly, but I'm terrified. His hand on my stomach pressed more firmly, anchoring. Of what? That this is temporary. That I'll wake up and you'll realize you made a mistake. That your pack will reject me the way mine did. That I'll lose this. Lose you, and it'll break me worse than the first rejection. The horse slowed, then stopped. Kalen's hand on the reins signaled the others to halt as well, giving us a moment of privacy despite our audience. Look at me, he said softly. I twisted in the saddle, meeting those pale gold eyes in the moonlight. I don't make mistakes about what matters, he said, his voice low and fierce. You are my mate, my equal, my partner. That's not temporary. That's not something I'll wake up and regret. That's forever, Isla. Do you understand? I want to, I whispered. Then believe this. He cupped my face with one hand, the reins loose in his other. I have been Alpha Prime for 8 years. I have led packs through wars and famine and political nightmares. I have made decisions that cost lives and saved territories. And in all that time, I have never not once been as certain of anything as I am of you. The conviction in his words cracked something open in my chest. You fed me when I was dying, he continued, cared for me when I was helpless, protected me from my own wolves because you thought I needed it. You didn't know who I was, didn't know what I could give you. You just loved me anyway. I did, I admitted, the truth of it overwhelming. I do. His eyes blazed. Then trust that this is real. Trust that I'm not going anywhere. And trust that anyone who tries to reject you will answer to me. I almost smiled at that. You really are dramatic. This time, he did smile, a real one that transformed his entire face. Only about you. We rode through the dawn, stopping only once to water the horses and let everyone rest. I dozed against Kalen's chest, lulled by the rhythm of the horse and the warmth of his body, feeling safer than I had in a year. When we stopped for a longer break near midday, Marcus approached with food-dried meat and bread that tasted like heaven after months of subsisting on whatever I could trap or forage. We'll reach Shadow Ridge by tomorrow evening, he told Cullen, though his eyes kept flicking to me with barely concealed curiosity. The council has been informed of your return. And? Kalen's tone was sharp. And they're eager to discuss what happened. Marcus chose his words carefully. There are questions about the assassination attempt, about who ordered it, about... He glanced at me again. Say it, Kalen ordered. About her, Marcus finished. About an unmated Alpha Prime suddenly appearing with an Omega from Crescent Valley Pack. They're concerned about political implications. I felt my stomach drop, but Kalen just laughed a sound without humor. Political implications, he repeated. Tell the council that my mate is none of their concern, and if they have questions, they can ask me directly. Marcus's eyes widened slightly. Your mate? You've confirmed the bond? I've confirmed it, Kalen said, his hand finding mine and lacing our fingers together. Isla is my fated mate. That makes her future Luna of Shadow Ridge and mate to the Alpha Prime. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me personally. The air seemed to thicken with the weight of that declaration. Sarah and the other 2 warriors had gone still, their attention locked on us with varying degrees of shock. Alpha Prime, Sarah said carefully. Are you certain? Fated mates are... I know what they are, Kalen interrupted. I know how rare they are. I know what it means. And I'm telling you, all of you, that Isla Crane is mine. My wolf recognized her. The bond is absolute. She saved my life and she owns my heart. Is that clear enough? Silence fell over the clearing. Then, one by one, the 4 warriors dropped to one knee. Yes, Alpha Prime, they said in unison. Welcome, Luna. I stared at them, then at Kalen, my heart hammering. Luna? Mate to the Alpha Prime, he explained, his thumb stroking over my knuckles. It's a title, a position, and it's yours. I don't know how to be a Luna, I said, panic rising. I'm an Omega. I was trained for— You were trained to be underestimated, he interrupted gently. But you're more than what they told you. You survived exile, built a life from nothing, saved an Alpha Prime's life with nothing but determination and heart. You have exactly what it takes to be Luna. What if I fail? The question burst out before I could stop it. What if I'm not strong enough? Not smart enough? Not— Isla. He turned me to face him fully, both hands on my face now, forcing me to meet his eyes. Do you know what a fated mate bond means? I shook my head, my knowledge of such things limited to childhood stories. It means the universe looked at all the wolves in existence and decided we were made for each other, he said. It means your strengths balance my weaknesses. Your light tempers my darkness. It means that together, we're more than we could ever be apart. His forehead rested against mine, his voice dropping to something intimate. It means I was incomplete before you, he whispered. And now I'm whole. So no, you won't fail. Because you're exactly who I need, who the pack needs, who fate knew we needed. Tears burned in my eyes. I'm scared. I know. He kissed my forehead, my cheeks, the tip of my nose, gentle touches that soothed the raw edges of my fear. But you're not alone anymore. You have me. You have my wolves. You have an entire pack that will protect you because you're mine. What if they don't accept me? His eyes hardened. Then they'll learn to, because you're not going anywhere. You're my mate, my Luna, my everything. And I'll burn down anyone who tries to make you feel less than that. There was that dramatic streak again. But this time, I didn't tease him about it, because I could feel the truth of his words through the bond, the absolute certainty that he meant every syllable. Okay, I said, my voice steadier. Okay, I'll try. That's all I ask. He kissed me then, soft and sweet and full of promise. Now eat. We have a long ride ahead. As we mounted the horse again and resumed our journey, I looked back one last time toward the south, toward the territory that had rejected me, the cabin that had sheltered me, the life I'd built from scraps and stubbornness. Then I turned forward, toward Shadow Ridge, toward a future I couldn't imagine but was beginning to believe in, toward home. We reached Shadow Ridge at dusk on the second day, and it took my breath away. The territory sprawled across a valley ringed by mountains, with a fortress built into the cliff face that looked like it had grown from the stone itself. Lights flickered in hundreds of windows. Wolves moved through the grounds below, more wolves than I'd ever seen in one place. The sheer scope of it was overwhelming. Home, Kalen said quietly behind me, but there was tension in his voice that hadn't been there before. The gates opened as we approached, guards snapping to attention. Word had clearly spread of Kalen's return because wolves lined the path, watching with a mixture of relief and curiosity. Their eyes tracked me with questions I could feel, even if they didn't voice them. Marcus led us directly to the main hall, a massive stone building that radiated power and history. Council members waited inside, 12 of them arranged in a semicircle, their faces grave, and standing at the center, looking perfectly composed, was a man who could only be Kalen's brother. The resemblance was striking. Same black hair, same strong features, same commanding presence. But where Kalen's eyes were pale gold, this man's were dark brown. And where Cullen radiated controlled dominance, this man projected something oily, political, dangerous in a different way. Brother, the man said, his voice warm and welcoming in a way that made my skin crawl. Thank the gods you're alive. We feared the worst. Did you, Darius? Kalen's voice was ice. Is that why you took my seat? Declared yourself interim Alpha Prime? Started making territorial agreements in my name? The temperature in the room dropped. Darius's smile didn't falter. Someone had to lead while you were indisposed. The pack couldn't be left without direction. I was gone 3 weeks, Kalen said, dismounting in one fluid motion before lifting me down with careful hands. 3 weeks, and you'd already moved into my chambers and started issuing commands. You were presumed dead. One of the council members interjected, an older woman with silver hair and sharp eyes. The poison they used was lethal. No one survives wolfsbane combined with— I survived, Kalen interrupted, because someone cared enough to save me. His hand found mine, lacing our fingers together in front of everyone. A public claim. Darius's eyes landed on me for the first time, and the hatred I saw there was barely concealed. And who is this? My mate, Kalen said flatly. Isla Crane, your Luna. The room erupted. Council members spoke over each other, voices rising in shock and protest. But I heard the key words through the chaos. Crescent Valley, Omega, exile, unsuitable, political disaster. My face burned, but I kept my chin up, kept my hand steady in Kalen's even though I wanted to run. Enough. Kalen's voice cracked like a whip, silencing everyone instantly. I don't recall asking for your approval. I'm informing you of fact. Isla is my fated mate. The bond is confirmed. She will be acknowledged as Luna, or you will find yourselves replaced. Kalen, Darius said, his tone reasonable but his eyes cold. Be rational. A fated mate is a gift, truly, but an exiled Omega from a minor pack? The political ramifications alone. I don't care about politics, Kalen snarled, and I felt his wolf pressing against the surface, barely leashed. I care about my mate, and anyone who threatens her threatens me. Is that clear? Darius held his hands up in mock surrender. Of course, brother. I only want what's best for the pack. But I saw it then, the flash of calculation in his eyes. The way his gaze lingered on me with something predatory and cold. He didn't just hate that Kalen had survived. He hated that I existed. Later, after Kalen had dismissed the council and shown me to chambers that were larger than my entire cabin, Marcus appeared with information that made everything click into place. It was Darius, he told Kalen, his voice low and furious. We confirmed it. He hired the rogues who poisoned you, wanted you dead so he could claim the position permanently. My blood ran cold. Kalen's brother had tried to kill him. He knew the poison would shift me back to pup form, Kalen said, pieces falling into place. Knew I'd be vulnerable, weak, easy to finish off if the poison didn't do the job. But he didn't account for you making it as far as you did, Marcus continued. Or for someone actually helping you. Kalen's hand tightened on mine. He's going to come after her. It wasn't a question. It was certainty. We'll protect her, Marcus said immediately. Double the guards. Restrict. He's already made his move, Kalen interrupted, his jaw tight, calling her unsuitable in front of the council, planting seeds of doubt. He'll use politics first, try to force me to reject the bond for the good of the pack, and when that fails, he'll try to eliminate me. I finished quietly. Both men looked at me. An exiled Omega is an easy target, I continued, my voice steadier than I felt. No family to avenge me, no pack to demand justice. If I disappear, Kalen is devastated, but the pack moves on. Maybe even thanks Darius for handling the problem. The growl that ripped from Kalen's chest rattled the windows. That won't happen, he said, the promise violent. I'll kill him first. He's your brother, I said softly. He's a traitor who tried to murder me and now threatens my mate. His eyes blazed. Blood means nothing compared to that. First assassination attempt. It happened 3 nights later. I was in our chambers. Kalen had insisted I stay close, had moved me into his rooms despite the scandal it caused reading by the fire when I heard the first scream. Then the clash of steel, snarls, the sound of fighting erupting in the corridors. My wolf surged to the surface, every instinct screaming danger. I grabbed the knife Kalen had given me just in case, he'd said, and moved toward the door. It burst open before I reached it. 2 wolves I didn't recognize, eyes wild with bloodlust, charged into the room. Rogues. Had to be. No pack wolf would attack the Alpha Prime's chambers. I didn't freeze, didn't scream. The months of survival had burned those instincts out of me. I moved. The first wolf lunged, and I dove to the side, bringing my knife up in an arc that caught him across the shoulder. Not deep enough to kill, but enough to make him yelp. The second came from behind and I spun, but I was too slow. He never reached me. Kalen materialized like vengeance itself, his shift so fast I barely saw it. One moment human, the next a massive black wolf with pale gold eyes that burned with fury. He caught the rogue mid-leap, jaws closing around the wolf's throat with devastating precision. The sound of the neck snapping echoed through the chamber. The first wolf tried to run. Kalen was faster. He took the rogue down in the doorway, killing him with the same brutal efficiency before shifting back to human form. He was covered in blood. His eyes were wild. And the first thing he did before checking his own wounds, before calling for guards, was turn to me. "Are you hurt?" His hands were on me instantly, running over my arms, my face, checking for injuries with shaking fingers. "Isla, answer me. Did they touch you?" "I'm fine," I managed, my voice surprisingly steady despite the two corpses bleeding out on the floor. "They didn't, I'm okay." He pulled me against his chest, his heart hammering against my ear. The blood on his skin was warm and sticky, but I didn't care. I wrapped my arms around him and held on while he shook. "They came for you," he said against my hair, his voice ragged. "They breached my home, my chambers, and came for you. But they failed," I pointed out. "I'm safe." He pulled back enough to look at me, and what I saw in his eyes made my breath catch. Possession, protection, primal claiming that went beyond reason or civilization. "You are mine," he said, each word deliberate and fierce. "Mine to protect, mine to keep safe. And they will learn every wolf who thinks they can take you from me will learn that I will paint this territory red before I let anyone hurt you. Kalin, I should have marked you already," he continued almost to himself. "Should have made it absolutely clear that you're under my protection. That touching you means death. We agreed to wait," I reminded him gently. "To let me adjust. I don't care about adjustment anymore." His hands cupped my face, trembling. "I care about keeping you alive, and an unmarked mate is vulnerable. They saw that, exploited it." Guards poured into the room, led by Marcus, who took in the scene with grim satisfaction. "Darius's wolves," Marcus confirmed, nudging one of the bodies with his boot. "We caught 3 more trying to breach the private wing, all hired rogues." "Where is my brother?" Kalen's voice was deadly calm. "In his chambers. Claims he was asleep. Knew nothing about the attack." "Of course he does." Kalen's jaw worked. "Double the guard on Isla. No one gets within 50 feet of her without my explicit permission. And find me proof something that ties Darius directly to this. I need evidence the council can't ignore." "Yes, Alpha Prime." As the guards removed the bodies and secured the room, Kalen led me to the bathroom. He cleaned the blood from his skin with methodical precision, his hands still shaking slightly, while I sat on the edge of the tub and watched. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "For what?" "For bringing you into this. You survived exile, built a life, and I pulled you into politics and assassination attempts and—" "Stop," I interrupted, standing to face him. "You didn't pull me into anything. I chose this, chose you. And I'm not some helpless Omega who needs to be hidden away." His eyes met mine. "I know you're not. Then trust me to fight beside you, not behind you." Something shifted in his expression. Pride, maybe? Or respect? "You're extraordinary," he said softly. "Do you know that?" "I'm terrified," I admitted. "But I'm not leaving. I'm not running. Because whatever this is, whatever we're facing, we face it together." He crossed the distance between us in 2 strides, pulling me into a kiss that tasted like desperation and promise and forever. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. "Together," he agreed. "Always." That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound made me jump. Every shadow seemed to hide threats. My wolf was on edge, pacing inside me, hyper-aware of danger even though guards now stood outside our door, and Kalen had personally checked every window and entrance twice. "Come here," Kalen said from the bed, his voice rough with exhaustion. I'd been standing by the window, staring out at Shadow Ridge spread below us. "I don't want to wake you." I'm not sleeping either. He sat up, the sheets pooling at his waist. Please, Isla, come here. I crossed to the bed, letting him pull me down beside him. He arranged us so I was tucked against his chest, his arms wrapped securely around me, my ear pressed to where his heartbeat was finally slowing to normal. Better? He murmured. Better, I confirmed, some of the tension leaving my body. We lay there in silence for a while, just breathing together. Then, tell me something, he said. Something real, something I don't know yet. I thought for a moment. When I was little, before my mother died, she used to tell me that omegas were the heart of the pack, that we weren't weak, we were essential. We felt things other wolves couldn't, connected in ways that made the pack whole. She was right. My father disagreed. After she was gone, he said those stories were lies, that omegas were burdens, weak links. I spent years trying to prove him wrong, to be stronger, to be worth keeping. And then Garrett rejected me, and I thought maybe my father was right. Maybe I really was worthless. Kaylin's arms tightened. Keep going. But in that cabin, alone and exiled, I learned something. I learned that I didn't need their validation. That surviving, truly surviving, took more strength than any of them knew. And when you showed up at my door, dying and helpless, I realized my mother was right all along. My heart was my strength, my ability to care, to help, to love without expecting anything back that was power they never understood. He pulled back enough to look at me, his eyes burning. You saved me in more ways than you know. Tell me, I whispered. I've been Alpha Prime for 8 years, he said. 8 years of politics and power plays and wolves who wanted something from me. I was good at it, the strategy, the dominance, the control. But I was empty, going through motions without feeling anything real. And then I woke up in your cabin with you hovering over me, terrified and determined, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. What? Hope. His hand came up to trace my face. You looked at me like I mattered. Not because of my title or power. You didn't even know who I was. You just saw someone who needed help and you gave it. No conditions, no expectations, just kindness. Galin, I fell in love with you those first 3 days, he admitted, his voice raw. When I was too weak to shift, too sick to speak, I lay there and listened to you talk to me. Watched you fight for me. And I knew this wolf, this incredible, stubborn, beautiful wolf. She's mine, and I'm hers, forever. Tears spilled down my cheeks. I love you too. I tried not to, tried to protect myself, but you were impossible not to love. He kissed me then, deep and desperate and full of everything we'd been holding back. His hands tangled in my hair and I arched against him, the bond between us flaring to life with an intensity that stole my breath. Isla, he groaned against my mouth. If you don't stop me now. I kissed him harder, my hand sliding over the muscles of his chest, learning the landscape of his body. He pulled back with visible effort, his eyes blazing. We can't. Not yet. Why? The word came out frustrated. Because when I mate you, when I mark you, every wolf in this territory will know, including Darius. And right now, leaving you unmarked gives us an advantage. He thinks you're vulnerable, unprotected. He'll get careless. You're using me as bait, I realized. I'm using his arrogance against him, Kaylin corrected. But I'm also keeping you safe. I won't risk you. Not for anything. I understood the logic. Hated it, but understood it. Soon, he promised, his thumb brushing my lower lip. Once we have proof, once Darius is dealt with, I'll make you mine in every way that matters. Promise? I promise. He kissed me again, softer this time. Now sleep. You're safe. I've got you. I curled against him, letting his warmth and presence soothe the jagged edges of my fear. And for the first time since the attack, I believed we might actually survive this. Together. They came 4 days after the assassination attempt, arriving at the gates of Shadow Ridge with the arrogance of wolves who thought they still had power over me. I was in the training yard with Sarah, learning basic combat because, she'd said bluntly, An Alpha Prime's mate needs to know how to defend herself. When Marcus appeared, his expression grim. "You have visitors," he said. "From Crescent Valley Pack." My blood turned to ice. "What?" "Your former Alpha has requested an audience. He's brought—" Marcus hesitated. "He's brought your father and Garrett Thorne." The world tilted. For a moment I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but stand there while old wounds ripped open. "Isla." Sarah's hand on my shoulder steadied me. "You don't have to see them. Say the word and we'll send them away." But even as she said it, I knew I couldn't do that, because running from them would mean they still had power over me, and I'd spent too long rebuilding myself to let them take that away. "No," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "I'll see them." Kalen was waiting in the main hall when I arrived, dressed in full Alpha regalia, black leather, and ceremonial markings that emphasized his authority. His eyes found mine the moment I entered, and I saw the question there. "Are you okay? Do you want me to handle this?" I gave a small nod. "I can do this." His expression softened with pride before hardening again as the doors opened. Alpha Wade entered first, still broad-shouldered and commanding, though his hair had more gray than I remembered. My father followed, his face as stern and disapproving as always. And finally Garrett, looking exactly the same as the day he'd rejected me. Handsome, confident, utterly unbothered. They stopped when they saw Kalen, recognition and shock rippling across their faces. Everyone knew of the Alpha Prime. Everyone knew his reputation. "Alpha Prime," Wade said, recovering quickly and inclining his head in respect. "We didn't realize we were told an Omega from our pack had taken refuge here. We've come to bring her home." "Have you?" Kalen's voice was ice-wrapped in silk. "And did it occur to you to ask if she wanted to go home?" Wade's eyes flicked to me, standing beside Kalen, and I saw the calculation there. "Isla, this has gone on long enough. Your sabbatical is over. It's time to return to the pack." Sabbatical, like my exile had been a vacation. "I'm not coming back," I said, my voice clear and steady. My father stepped forward. "Don't be foolish, girl. You've made your point. You survived. Proved whatever you needed to prove. Now stop this nonsense and come home where you belong." "I don't belong there," I said. "You made that very clear when you exiled me." "We made a mistake," Wade said smoothly, his politician's smile firmly in place. "Tempers were high. Decisions were made in haste. But you're still pack, Isla. Still family. We want you back." "You want something," Kalen corrected, his voice cutting. "And it's not her well-being. So why don't you tell us what you really came for?" Wade's smile tightened. "We've heard rumors about your relationship with this Omega. We're concerned she may have misrepresented her status, taken advantage of your kindness. She was exiled for good reason." "She was exiled because your pack is too blind to recognize value when it's standing in front of you," Kalen interrupted, his dominance rolling off him in waves that made all three visitors step back. "Isla Crane is my fated mate, my Luna, and she's under my protection, permanently." Garrett laughed, actually laughed. "Your mate? Her?" He looked at me with the same disgust he'd shown during the rejection. "Alpha Prime. I don't know what she told you, but she's a weak Omega. I rejected her myself. She's not mate material for someone of your—" The growl that came from Kalen rattled the windows. "Finish that sentence and I'll rip your throat out where you stand." Garrett's mouth snapped shut, his face paling. "You rejected her," Kalen continued, each word sharp as broken glass. "You, a pathetic excuse for a wolf who doesn't deserve to breathe the same air as her, had the audacity to reject the most extraordinary Omega I've ever met. And you want to stand there and tell me she's not worthy?" He stepped forward, and despite being outnumbered, despite facing an Alpha and his entourage, Kalen's presence dominated the room. "Let me make this clear," he said, his voice dropping to something deadly. "Isla is mine. She was mine the moment fate decided we belonged to each other. She is my mate, my Luna, and the future mother of my heirs. She has more worth in her smallest finger than your entire pack combined. And if any of you ever speak of her with anything less than absolute respect again, I will consider it a declaration of war." The silence that followed was absolute. My father found his voice first. "Isla, please, be reasonable. Think about what you're doing. This attachment, it can't be real. You're confusing gratitude with—" "I'm not confused," I interrupted, stepping forward. "For the first time in my life, I'm seeing clearly." I looked at each of them in turn, Wade, my father, Garrett, and felt nothing. No pain, no longing, just a distant sort of pity for wolves so trapped by their own prejudices that they couldn't see what was right in front of them. "You taught me I was worthless," I said quietly. "That being an Omega made me weak, that I needed to earn my place, prove my value, apologize for existing, and I believed you. For years, I believed every word." My father's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. "But then you threw me away," I continued, "cast me out to die. And do you know what I learned out there? Alone in the wilderness you were so certain would kill me?" "What?" Wade asked, his tone condescending. "That you were wrong." I straightened my spine, lifted my chin. "About everything. I'm not weak. I'm not worthless. I don't need your acceptance or approval to have value. I survived because I'm stronger than any of you ever gave me credit for. And I found something in that exile that I never had in your pack." "What's that?" Garrett sneered. "Myself," I said simply. "And then I found him." I gestured to Kaylin. "A mate who sees me, values me, loves me for exactly who I am, not who I should be." "Isla," my father started. "No," I cut him off. "You don't get to Isla me. You don't get to pretend you care now that it's convenient. You disowned me, watched me walk into exile without a word, and now you want me back because having the Alpha Prime's mate come from your pack gives you political leverage." Wade had the grace to look uncomfortable. "I'm not coming back," I said again. Final this time. "Not now. Not ever. Crescent Valley Pack is my past. Kaylin is my future. And I choose him." Kaylin's hand found mine, lacing our fingers together. The bond between us flared, warm and right, and absolutely certain. "Then you're making a mistake," my father said coldly. "No," I replied. "The only mistake I made was believing anything you ever said about me." Wade recognized a losing battle when he saw one. "Very well, but don't come crying back when this infatuation ends. You'll find no welcome there." "I won't," I assured him, "because this isn't infatuation. It's fate, and it's forever." They left without another word, and I watched them go without a single regret. When the doors closed, Kaylin pulled me into his arms. "I'm so proud of you," he murmured against my hair. "They were right about one thing," I said. "What's that?" "I did find something in you that I never had before." I pulled back to look at him. "Home." His eyes blazed. "Isla, mark me," I interrupted. "Tonight. Now. I don't want to wait anymore. I don't want there to be any doubt about who I belong to." "Are you sure?" he asked, searching my face. "Once it's done." "I'm sure," I said fiercely. "I've never been more sure of anything. I choose you, Kaylin. I choose us. I choose forever." He took me to his chambers, our chambers, and locked the door behind us. The air felt electric, charged with anticipation and the weight of what we were about to do. A mating mark wasn't just physical, it was spiritual, permanent. It would bind our souls together in a way that nothing could break. "Last chance," Kaylin said, his voice rough. "Once I mark you, there's no going back. You'll be mine forever. Bound to me. Connected in ways that go beyond reason." "I know," I said, reaching up to cup his face. "That's what I want. You. Forever. No hesitation. No doubts." Something fierce and possessive flashed in his eyes. "You're sure?" Instead of answering, I tilted my head, baring my throat to him, the ultimate sign of trust, submission, acceptance. His breath caught. "Isla, I'm yours," I whispered. "Make it permanent." He moved then, pulling me against him with hands that shook slightly. His mouth found mine in a kiss that was desperate and claiming and full of promises. When he pulled back, his eyes had shifted pale gold, bleeding into something wilder, more primal. His wolf, rising to the surface. "This will hurt," he warned, his voice rough with the change. "Just for a moment. And then—" "I trust you," I interrupted. He kissed me again, softer this time, before his mouth moved to my jaw, my neck, the sensitive spot where my shoulder met my throat. His teeth grazed the skin there, and I shivered, my wolf surging forward in recognition. "Yes, this, him, forever. I love you," he said against my skin. "My mate, my Luna, mine." Then his teeth sank in. The pain was immediate and sharp, but it didn't last. Almost instantly, it transformed into something else. Heat, pleasure. A connection so profound it felt like my soul was expanding, reaching out, twining with his until I couldn't tell where I ended, and he began. I felt him, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually. Every thought, every feeling, every piece of his essence pouring into me through the bond. His love, his devotion, his absolute certainty that we belonged together. And he felt me too. I could sense it the way my emotions flooded through him, the overwhelming rightness of this moment, the completion of something that had been broken in both of us. When he finally pulled back, licking the wound to seal it, I was shaking, not from pain, but from the sheer intensity of what we'd just done. "Breathe," he said softly, holding me steady. "Just breathe through it." I pressed my hand to the mark on my neck and felt it his claim, permanent and powerful, already beginning to heal into a scar that would tell every wolf who saw it exactly who I belonged to. "How do you feel?" he asked, his thumb brushing away the tears streaming down my face. "Whole," I whispered. "For the first time in my life, I feel completely whole." He kissed me then, and I tasted my own blood on his lips, the copper tang mixing with the sweetness of the moment. "My turn," I said, my voice steadier. His eyes widened. "You don't have to." "I want to," I interrupted. "I want everyone to know you're mine too." The smile that broke across his face was brilliant. He tilted his head, offering his throat the way I'd offered mine, and the trust in that gesture made my heart ache. I'd never marked anyone before, didn't know the proper technique, but my wolf knew. She surged forward, guiding my movements as I pressed my mouth to his neck and let my teeth extend. When I bit down, the bond flared again, this time from my end. I poured everything I felt into him through the connection. My love, my gratitude, my absolute certainty that he was my fate, my future, my forever. He groaned, his hands tightening on my waist, and I felt his pleasure echo through the bond. When I pulled back, blood stained his skin. I licked the wound like he'd done for me, sealing it, claiming him as thoroughly as he'd claimed me. "There," I said, slightly breathless. "Now we match." He laughed deep and genuine and full of joy before pulling me into a kiss that promised forever. And as we stood there, marked and mated and completely intertwined, I realized that I'd been wrong all those months ago in my cabin. I hadn't just survived my exile. I'd found my way home. The Grand Summit was called 3 days after our mating. It was tradition when an Alpha Prime took a mate. The neighboring packs gathered to witness the formal announcement and pledge their continued alliance. But this summit carried additional weight. Colin had sent word that he had revelations about the assassination attempt, and every Alpha within 3 territories wanted to hear what he had to say. The Great Hall had been transformed. Banners hung from the rafters representing each pack in attendance. Long tables lined the walls, laden with food and drink, and at the center, raised on a dais, sat 2 thrones, one for the Alpha Prime, one for his Luna. My stomach churned as I dressed in the ceremonial gown Sarah had brought me. Deep blue silk that moved like water, with silver embroidery that caught the light. It was beautiful. It was also a statement I was no longer an exiled Omega in salvaged clothes. I was Luna of Shadow Ridge, mate to the most powerful wolf in the region. "You're going to be magnificent," Sarah said, adjusting the clasp at my shoulder. "They're going to see exactly what Kaelin sees." They're going to see an Omega who doesn't belong, I said quietly. They're going to see a Luna who survived what would have killed most wolves, she corrected firmly. You saved an Alpha Prime's life, Isla. You earned your place here. Now you just have to show them. Colin was waiting outside my chambers, dressed in black leather and ceremonial armor that made him look every inch the warrior king he was. But when he saw me, something softened in his expression. Beautiful, he murmured, taking my hand and pressing a kiss to my knuckles. Though you could be wearing rags and you'd still be the most stunning wolf in that room. Flatterer, I said, but my smile was genuine. Are you ready? He asked, and I knew he wasn't just asking about the ceremony. He was asking if I was ready to face my father again, to stand in front of wolves who would judge me, to claim my place despite every voice that said I didn't deserve it. I touched the mating mark on my neck, already healed into a silver scar that proclaimed his claim, and felt the bond between us pulse with warmth and certainty. I'm ready, I said. The hall fell silent as we entered. Every eye turned to watch us walk down the center aisle, Colin in front, radiating dominance, and me at his side where a Luna belonged. I kept my head high, my spine straight, refusing to show the nerves threatening to overwhelm me. The Alphas were already seated, 12 of them, representing the most powerful packs in the region. I recognized Alpha Wade immediately, his expression carefully neutral. My father sat behind him, and I felt his disapproval like a physical weight. But I also saw surprise in their faces. Respect, grudging though it might be, because I wasn't cowering. I wasn't apologizing for my existence. I was standing beside the Alpha Prime like I belonged there. Because I did. Colin led me to the dais and we took our seats. The moment we did, every wolf in the room dropped to one knee in formal acknowledgement. Rise, Colin commanded, his voice carrying effortlessly through the space. They stood, but the attention remained fixed on us, on me. Most of you know the story, Colin began, his tone conversational but edged with steel. 4 weeks ago, I was poisoned. Wolfsbane mixed with silver and a half-dozen other compounds designed to kill an Alpha Prime. I was left to die in the wilderness, my wolf forced into pup form by the toxins, unable to shift back, unable to call for help. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. This was the first time Colin had spoken publicly about what happened. I should have died, he continued. The poison was specifically designed to be lethal. Whoever created it knew exactly what they were doing. They knew my physiology, my weaknesses, my habits. He paused, letting that sink in. But I survived, because I stumbled to a cabin 3 miles past Crescent Valley's northern boundary, and an exiled Omega took me in. His hand found mine, lacing our fingers together in front of everyone. Isla Crane didn't know who I was. She just saw a dying pup and decided to save him. She fought for my life every night for 2 weeks, fed me, healed me, protected me from threats she had no business facing alone. And when my wolves came to retrieve me, she stood between us with nothing but a knife and told them they'd have to go through her first. A few scattered laughs at that, but they were warm, appreciative. She is my fated mate, Colin declared, his voice ringing with absolute certainty. Chosen by fate itself, marked and claimed, my equal in every way that matters, and anyone who questions her place at my side can answer to me directly. The challenge in his words was unmistakable. No one spoke. Now, Colin continued, his tone hardening, let's discuss who tried to kill me. The atmosphere shifted immediately. This was what they'd all come to hear. My brother, Darius Thorne, hired the rogues who poisoned me. We have testimony from 3 of them, purchased ledgers showing payment, and correspondence proving he coordinated the entire attack. Gasps echoed through the hall. Darius, who'd been standing near the back, went pale. That's a lie, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. My own brother, I would never... You wanted my position, Colin said calmly. You've always wanted it, and you thought removing me would give you the power you've craved since we were children, but you made a mistake. What mistake? Darius demanded, trying to rally. You assumed no one would save me. Colin stood, his presence dominating the room. You assumed I'd die alone and forgotten, You didn't account for an exiled Omega with more courage and compassion than you'll ever possess." He looked at me then, and the love in his eyes made my breath catch. "She ruined your plans by being extraordinary," he continued, still speaking to Darius but looking at me. "And now you'll pay the price." Marcus stepped forward with 2 other guards, moving toward Darius. "Wait," my father's voice cut through the tension. "If there's to be justice, it should be done properly. A trial. Evidence presented." "There will be a trial," Kaelin agreed. "But Darius is under arrest as of now. The evidence is overwhelming." As the guards seized Darius, who went without fighting, his political instincts apparently telling him resistance would only make things worse, Alpha Wade stood. "Alpha Prime," he said formally, "Crescent Valley Pack wishes to apologize for our treatment of your mate. We were short-sighted. We failed to see her value. We're grateful she found her way to you." The apology was political, strategic, but I saw the calculation behind it. Wade recognizing that having his former pack member as Luna to the Alpha Prime could benefit him if he played it right. I stood before Kaelin could respond. "Crescent Valley Pack made their position clear when they exiled me," I said, my voice steady and cold. "I don't need your apology now. I don't need your approval. I needed it a year ago when I was terrified and alone. But you chose to throw me away. That choice is final." My father stood then, his face flushed. "Isla, you will show respect." "I will show respect to wolves who've earned it," I interrupted. "You disowned me. You stood by and watched them exile me. You hoped I'd die quietly so you wouldn't have to feel guilty. Well, I survived. And now I'm standing here as Luna of Shadow Ridge, while you're still Beta of a minor pack who threw away the best thing that ever happened to them." The silence was absolute. "I forgive you," I continued, and I saw surprise flicker across my father's face, because holding on to that anger would only hurt me. "But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. You'll never be part of my life again. That door is closed." I sat back down, my heart pounding, and felt Kaelin's hand squeeze mine in support. My father sat too, his expression unreadable. "If that concludes the personal matters," Kaelin said dryly, "we have a traitor to deal with." The trial was set for the following morning, but Darius didn't wait for it. He attacked that night. I was in our chambers, preparing for bed, when the alarms rang out. Not the controlled warning bells we'd heard during drills. These were chaos, frantic and urgent. Kaelin was on his feet instantly, already moving toward the weapons rack. "Stay here. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me or Marcus." "What's happening?" I demanded, grabbing the knife he'd given me. "Darius," he said grimly. "He's making his move." The sound of fighting erupted in the corridors, snarls and screams and the clash of steel. My wolf surged forward, every instinct screaming to help, to fight, to protect our mate. "I can help," I said. "No." Kaelin's voice was absolute. "He'll target you to get to me. I need you safe. And I need you to stop treating me like I'm fragile," I shot back. "We're mated now, bonded. That means I fight beside you, not hide while you face danger alone." He stared at me for a long moment, conflict warring in his expression. Then, finally, he nodded. "Stay close to me," he ordered. "Don't leave my sight. And if I tell you to run, I won't," I interrupted. "Isla, I won't run," I repeated firmly. "Not from this, not from him. We end this together." He pulled me into a fierce kiss, then thrust a second knife into my hand. "Then let's go." The corridors were chaos. Darius had somehow smuggled in nearly 24 rogues. They must have been hidden throughout the compound for days, waiting for his signal. They fought with desperate violence, knowing this was their only chance. Kaelin was magnificent. He cut through them like a force of nature, his wolf barely contained beneath his skin, his movements precise and lethal. I stayed behind him, watching his back, using my knives when enemies got too close. We fought our way to the main hall where Darius had barricaded himself with his remaining forces. 6 rogues and 3 of his loyalists stood between us and him. "Brother," Darius called out, his voice echoing. "It doesn't have to be like this. Share the power. Make me your second. We can rule together. You tried to kill me, Kaelin said flatly. There's no coming back from that. I tried to take what should have been mine, Darius corrected. Father always favored you, gave you everything while I had to fight for scraps. This position, it should have been mine. Then you should have been stronger, Kaelin said coldly. Should have earned it instead of poisoning your own blood. Darius's face twisted with rage. I am stronger, and I'll prove it by taking everything from you, starting with her. His eyes locked on me, and I saw murder in them. Come then, I said, surprising everyone, including myself. I stepped forward, moving beside Kaelin instead of behind him. If you want me, come take me. Isla, Kaelin started. He's a coward, I interrupted, my voice carrying. He poisons enemies because he can't beat them fairly. Hides behind hired rogues because he's too weak to fight his own battles. You want to prove you're stronger than Kaelin? Face him. One-on-one. No weapons. No tricks. Just you and him. It was a gamble. But I'd seen how Darius operated. Everything was about perception, about appearing powerful, and I'd just publicly called him weak. His pride wouldn't let that stand. Fine, Darius snarled. Clear the room. Your mate just signed your death warrant, brother. The rogues and loyalists backed away, forming a circle. Kaelin and Darius faced each other in the center, and I felt the bond between us thrumming with tension. I love you, I sent through the connection. End this. I will, he promised. For you. They shifted simultaneously, two massive black wolves circling each other. Darius was large, but Kaelin was larger, more muscular, more controlled. The Alpha Prime hadn't earned his position through politics. They clashed with vicious intensity. Teeth and claws and brutal efficiency. Blood splattered the stone floor. The sound of snarling filled the hall. But it was never really a contest. Kaelin was stronger, faster, more skilled. He'd been fighting since he was old enough to shift, had earned his dominance through 100 battles. Darius had been scheming in the shadows while Kaelin was becoming a warrior. Within minutes, Kaelin had Darius pinned, jaws locked around his brother's throat. One twist and it would be over. The room held its breath. Mercy, one of Darius's loyalists called out. He's your brother. Show mercy. Kaelin's eyes, pale, gold, and pitiless, found mine. The choice was his. But I knew he was asking what I thought, what I needed. I thought about mercy, about second chances, about the wolves who'd shown me none when I needed it most. And I thought about the future, about the pup I might be carrying his heir, about building something better than the cycle of betrayal and violence. End it, I sent through the bond, but make it clean. Don't become what he was. Kaelin's jaws tightened for just a moment. Then he released Darius's throat and shifted back to human form. You're exiled, he said, his voice carrying absolute authority. Take your loyalists and your rogues and leave my territory. If you ever return, if I ever hear you've caused trouble in any pack under my protection, I'll finish what I started tonight. Are we clear? Darius shifted back, blood streaming from wounds all over his body. You're weak, he spat. Just like always. Can't even— I'm strong enough to show mercy when it's deserved, Kaelin interrupted. But mistake that mercy for weakness again and you won't get a third chance. Now get out of my sight before I change my mind. Darius and his remaining followers fled, leaving only us and our loyal wolves. The hall erupted in cheers. Callan crossed to me immediately, pulling me into his arms. Are you hurt? I'm fine, I assured him. You? Perfect, he said. Now that it's over. I looked up at him, this man who'd been a dying pup in my arms, who'd become my mate, my partner, my everything, and smiled. No, I corrected. Now it's beginning. The formal proceedings began at dawn, 3 days after Darius's exile. The Great Hall was packed not just with visiting alphas who'd stayed for the summit, but with members of Shadow Ridge Pack who wanted to witness justice. The events of the past weeks had shaken the territory, and everyone needed to see that order had been restored. I sat beside Kaelin on the dais, wearing the deep blue gown that had become my ceremonial dress. His hand rested on my thigh beneath the table, a constant point of contact grounding me. Through the bond, I could feel his attention split between the proceedings and monitoring my emotional state. "I'm okay," I sent through the connection. "I know," he replied, "but I'm checking anyway." The first case was simple. The rogues who'd participated in Darius's coup. Those who'd survived were given a choice: permanent exile from all territories under Shadow Ridge's protection, or death. Most chose exile. The two who chose death received it swiftly and without ceremony. Then Alpha Wade was called forward. He approached the dais with his usual confidence, but I saw the tension in his shoulders. He knew he'd miscalculated badly by exiling me, and now he was facing the consequences. "Alpha Wade." Kaylin's voice was formal, cold. "Crescent Valley Pack stands accused of wrongful exile and abuse of an Omega under your protection. How do you answer?" Wade's jaw tightened. "The exile was a mistake in judgment, made during a time of pack tension. We've already extended our apologies." "Your apologies mean nothing," I interrupted, surprised by the steadiness in my own voice. Every eye in the room turned to me. Kaylin's hand squeezed my thigh in support, but he remained silent, letting me speak. "You exiled me because I was Omega," I continued, standing. "Because I was convenient to discard. Because you valued political alliances with the Thorn family more than you valued me. That wasn't a mistake. That was a choice." Wade opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. He was smart enough to know that arguing with the Alpha Prime's mate in front of this audience would only make things worse. "However," I said, and saw hope flicker in his eyes, "I don't believe in punishing an entire pack for the failures of their leadership. The wolves of Crescent Valley didn't exile me. You did." I looked at Kaylin, checking silently if I could continue. He nodded, a small smile playing at his lips. "Therefore," I said, "I propose that Alpha Wade be stripped of his position. Let the pack choose new leadership through proper challenge. Someone who values all their members, not just the strong ones." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. It was a harsh sentence. Being forced from Alpha position was a humiliation that would follow Wade for the rest of his life. But it wasn't death, wasn't permanent exile. It gave him a chance to rebuild, even if he'd never lead again. "The Luna has spoken," Kaylin said, his voice carrying absolute authority. "Does anyone contest her judgment?" Silence. "Then it's decided. Alpha Wade, you are stripped of your position, effective immediately. Crescent Valley Pack has 30 days to select new leadership through formal challenge. Until then, they operate under Shadow Ridge's direct supervision." Wade's face was ashen, but he bowed stiffly. "As you command, Alpha Prime." As he stepped back, my father was called forward. I'd been dreading this moment. Part of me wanted to be vindictive, to hurt him the way he'd hurt me. But a larger part, the part that had grown during my exile, that had learned what real strength looked like, just felt tired. "Thomas Crane," Kaylin said. "You stood by while your daughter was exiled, made no attempt to defend her, showed no concern for her welfare. You chose your position over your blood." My father's face remained impassive, but I saw his hands clench at his sides. "What punishment does the Luna decree?" Kaylin asked, turning to me. I looked at my father, really looked at him, and tried to remember when I'd stopped being his daughter and started being his disappointment. I couldn't pinpoint the exact moment. Maybe it had been gradual, starting the day my mother died and taking the softness in him with her. "Strip his rank," I said quietly. "Reduce him to Omega status for 1 year. Let him learn what it's like to be considered the weakest, the most disposable. Maybe then he'll understand what he did to me." It was poetic justice, cruel perhaps, but not undeserved. My father's face went white. For wolves like him, betas who'd spent their entire lives climbing the hierarchy, being reduced to Omega was worse than exile. It meant serving wolves he'd once commanded, taking orders from those he'd considered beneath him. "Please," he said, and it was the first time I'd ever heard him beg. "Isla, I'm your father. I know I failed you, but—" "You stopped being my father the day you let them cast me out," I interrupted. "This is mercy. Be grateful I didn't choose exile." Kaylin's hand found mine, squeezing gently. Through the bond, I felt his pride and his concern mixed together. 1 year, Kaylin confirmed. And if at the end of that year Thomas Crane has proven himself capable of compassion and humility, his rank will be restored. If not, the Omega status becomes permanent. My father stumbled back, supported by another wolf from his pack. I watched him go and felt nothing, no satisfaction, no pain, just a quiet sense of closure. Finally, Garrett was brought forward. He looked different than I remembered, smaller, somehow, less impressive. It was startling to realize that this wolf, who'd once seemed like the center of my universe, was just ordinary. Garrett Thorne, Kaylin said, and there was something dangerous in his tone now. You rejected your fated mate, treated her with contempt, made her believe she was worthless. Garrett kept his eyes down, smart enough not to meet Kaylin's gaze. Normally, I'd exile you for such disrespect, Kaylin continued, but my mate has asked me to show mercy where possible. So instead, you'll serve as Omega in Crescent Valley for 6 months. Learn some humility. And if I ever hear you've spoken ill of Isla again, if I even hear you've thought her name with anything less than respect, I'll reconsider that mercy. Yes, Alpha Prime, Garrett said, his voice barely audible. Look at me, Kaylin commanded. Garrett's head snapped up, fear evident in his eyes. You had a gift, Kaylin said softly. Fate gave you an extraordinary mate and you threw her away because you were too blind to see her value. That's a mistake you'll live with for the rest of your life. Do you understand? Yes, Alpha Prime. Good. Now bow to your Luna. Garrett's eyes widened, then flicked to me. I saw the war in his expression, pride fighting humiliation, but he was smart enough to know he had no choice. He dropped to one knee, head bowed. Luna. I looked down at him and felt the last piece of the old Isla, the one who'd loved him, who'd been destroyed by his rejection, finally dissolve. You're forgiven, I said simply. Now get up. You're not worth the energy it takes to hate you. He stood and backed away, and I knew I'd never think of him again. As the proceedings concluded and the crowd began to disperse, Kaylin leaned close to my ear. How do you feel? He murmured. Free, I said honestly. Like I finally closed a chapter I've been carrying around for too long. Good. He kissed my temple. Because we have a future to build, and I don't want them taking up any more space in it. The days that followed settled into a rhythm I'd never imagined possible. I woke each morning wrapped in Kaylin's arms, our bodies tangled together, the bond between us humming with contentment. He was possessive even in sleep, one arm always draped over me, holding me close, as if afraid I might disappear if he let go. Good morning, Luna, he'd murmur against my neck, his voice rough with sleep. Good morning, Alpha Prime, I'd reply, turning to face him. And then we'd lose ourselves in each other for a while, reaffirming the bond, connecting in ways that went beyond physical. Every touch was communication. Every kiss was a promise. Breakfast was taken in our private dining room, a smaller space than the Great Hall, reserved for the Alpha Prime and his inner circle. Marcus and Sarah usually joined us, along with whatever council members needed Kaylin's attention that day. The eastern border needs reinforcement, Marcus would say between bites of food. The rogues are getting bolder. Handle it, Kaylin would reply. Take 20 warriors. Make it clear that Shadow Ridge is not to be tested. What about the treaty negotiations with the Silver Moon Pack? Sarah would ask. They're still unhappy about the trade agreements. Isla will handle it, Kaylin would say, and the first time he'd said it, I'd nearly choked on my tea. What? I'd asked. You're Luna, he'd explained, as if it was obvious. Diplomacy is part of your role, and you're better at it than I am. I tend to threaten people. You actually listen to them. And so I'd found myself taking on responsibilities I'd never trained for, mediating disputes between pack members, overseeing the Omega and PUP programs that had been neglected under previous leadership, working with the healers to improve medical care. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. You're a natural, Sarah told me one afternoon as we reviewed housing assignments. The pack adores you. They tolerate me, I corrected. They adore you, she insisted. You listen, you care, you remember their names and their problems. You treat omegas like they matter. Do you know how rare that is? I didn't know how to respond to that, so I just kept working. Evenings were my favorite time. After the day's responsibilities were handled, Kaylin and I would retreat to our chambers or walk through the grounds, just being together. "Tell me something," he'd say, pulling me against his side as we watched the sunset from the balcony. "Something I don't know yet. I'm running out of secrets," I'd tease. "Then tell me something you've never told anyone." So I'd share pieces of myself, childhood memories, fears I'd never voiced, dreams I'd been too afraid to admit. And he'd do the same, letting me see past the Alpha Prime exterior to the man underneath. "I was terrified," he admitted one night, "when I realized you were my mate, terrified you'd reject me, that I'd lose you before I ever had you." "Why would I reject you?" I'd asked, genuinely confused. "Because I'm dominant, possessive, not easy to live with." He'd turn to face me, his expression serious. "Because I knew that being with me meant danger. Politics, expectations. I knew it would be easier for you if the bond had never formed." "Easier isn't always better," I'd said, cupping his face. "And I wouldn't trade us for anything." The vulnerability in his eyes had stolen my breath. At pack gatherings, he was never far from me. His hand would rest on the small of my back, or he'd stand close enough that our arms brushed, little touches that said mine without words. "You're being dramatic again," I'd whisper when his arm tightened around me because another male alpha looked at me a moment too long. "I'm being appropriate," he'd counter. "He needs to remember you're taken. Everyone knows I'm taken. I have your mark on my neck. Doesn't hurt to reinforce it." But despite the possessiveness, or maybe because of it, I felt cherished, protected, like I was the most important thing in his world, because I was. He told me as much every day, through words and actions and the constant hum of the bond between us. "I love you," he'd say at random moments, during breakfast, in the middle of council meetings, while we were getting ready for bed, like he couldn't help himself. "I love you too," I'd reply every time, and I meant it with my entire soul. 3 months after the summit, Sarah found me in the garden where I'd been working with the Omega children, teaching them that being Omega didn't mean being weak. "Luna," she said, her expression strange, "the healer needs to see you." My heart jumped. "Is something wrong?" "I don't think so," Sarah said carefully, "but she has. News." I found Kaylin in his office and brought him with me, my hand clutched in his, the bond thrumming with our combined anxiety. The healer, an older woman named Mira, smiled when she saw us. "Congratulations," she said simply. "You're expecting, Luna, about 6 weeks along." The world tilted. I looked at Kaylin and saw my shock reflected in his face. Then, slowly, joy began to bloom in him, in me, in the bond between us. "A pup," he breathed, his hand coming to rest on my still flat stomach. "We're having a pup." "We're having a pup," I confirmed, tears streaming down my face. He pulled me into his arms, holding me like I was made of glass and steel at the same time precious and unbreakable. "Thank you," he whispered against my hair. "Thank you for surviving, for saving me, for choosing me, for this." "Thank you for finding me," I replied, "for seeing me, for loving me when I'd forgotten how to love myself." We stood there for a long moment, just holding each other, feeling the bond pulse with new life and infinite possibility. Outside, Shadow Ridge carried on. Wolves trained and worked and lived their lives. The territory thrived under leadership that valued strength and compassion in equal measure. And in that healer's room, wrapped in my mate's arms with our future growing inside me, I finally understood what home really meant. It wasn't a place. It was this. Us. Together. Always. Thank you for listening to another emotional, magical shifter romance here on Tina Romance Library. If you enjoyed today's story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, so you never miss more powerful, heart-gripping romance stories.